well, I'm sorry, still before the committee, as well as still before the mayor's office, before a substitute can come before us.
So the mayor doesn't like that language then, about.
Obviously not.
Yeah.
Obviously not.
The version that I saw last week had the mayor making the final decision.
I think you may have seen the substitute.
Oh, that was another.
And the substitute has not been before the committee yet.
Well, there's no way City Hall's gonna let this commission make the final decision on policy, is it?
Well, we don't know. You know, we said earlier that the commission would not be writing policy. But as the ordinance is presented before, the commission will have a say in writing policy and approving policy.
And you support that?
I do support it, yes.
So why not also give the commission, if they're gonna set policy, the ability to hire or fire the superintendent?
Well, they have the same authority that the police board has now, and that's the ability to present candidates to the mayor. And I think that's a good thing for the commission, because now you have an elected voice that has a say in having, or in hiring, of not just the superintendent, but police board members as well as chief administrator of COPA.
Chris, let's put it this way. The FOP doesn't want any commission. And this commission wants policy-making authority. So wouldn't middle ground be to let them suggest policy, but when there are disagreements, let the mayor make the call?
Suggest policy for the police
Yeah.
department?
One of the versions that I saw where they would suggest policy, they could write policy, they could approve general orders, but if there is a disagreement about what policy needs to be implemented between the commission and the CPD, the mayor would make that call.
Well, I certainly, respect the FOP's position. In fact, the FOP, as they've told me, they don't want to see a commission at all.
Right.
They believe we already have enough oversight over Chicago police. And as I've told them, that this is not oversight over police officers. This strictly has to do with policy, hiring and firing of a police superintendent, but it's not oversight over the officers specifically. Although I do respect their position, I disagree with their position as well.
Do you think this board is sufficiently independent of the mayor? Isn't the point to be on its own and
The board is not completely independent of the mayor simply because the mayor appoints the board. But with the elected representative that are selecting or that will be selecting the nominees to be presented before the mayor, it does have a sense of independency and it does have a sense of community voice because they are elected and they will present the commission to the mayor for approval.
How's this going to get worked out in time to get these people elected and on the ballot in November?
I hope that as they continue to sit at the table, whether it take an hour or 2 hours or 2 weeks, that we can eventually get it done.
What do you say to people who say that it's too much to have COPA and the police board and this community commission, that's a doubling and wasting of city resources, when it should be concentrated just with one commission?
I would disagree. I would disagree with it.
Because why? Why is it
Well,
important?
I think you begin to run into a conflict of interest if you have one commission that is responsible for the discipline as well as implementing policy for everyone. I would disagree with that. And based on somewhat of a conflict of interest between one entity having all of that authority.
What looks like a good compromise to you?
Well, there's actually not a room for compromise on this. It's either the mayor will have final authority on policy or the Grassroots Alliance or the commission would have final authority. So there's not much of a compromise in this area.
And if
I think both have compromised a whole lot, the mayor's office as well as Grassroots Alliance. Because initially, Grassroots Alliance the commission would not be writing policy at all. But through compromise, both the police department and the commission will write policy. So I think there's been a lot of compromises, but because we've gotten to a final issue and it's either A or B, there's no room for in between.
And if she insists on having the final say on policy,
And if they agree with that, then that's the ordinance that we'll put before the committee.
but is there a way to
the community group, if they agree, you would put that in front of the
Of course,
committee?
if
But
they're in agreement with it,
And if they
But
don't,
if they don't, what happens then?
then we'll address it when it gets there.
will you hold a vote on one that they
All or
have,
nothing?
that they disagree with?
Well, I can't say what we'll do at that point because we're not faced with that yet. Once we are faced with it, then we'll definitely answer that.
How long are
one.
you gonna give it for that rubber
As
to
long-
meet the road?
As long as it takes.
Well, previously,
I'm hoping that we will get it done this month. Time is of the essence because we are looking at the need for petition. We are looking at possible election in November. So time is of the essence. I would love to see it get done before the 18th.
but previously during all of the task force hearings all around the city, the Citizens Police Council, CPAC,
Okay.
the Citizens Council on Police Accountability. They were in the middle of this discussion, and the majority of the residents were in support of it at every single one of those hearings. But now, the idea of establishing CPAC has basically disappeared from you all's conversation. What happened to that? Are you still going to have hearings about CPAC?
Well, I don't think it's disappeared from our conversation. I would disagree with that statement. It's still a part of our conversation. In fact, it was part of my conversation this morning. And as I understand it, there's a substitute ordinance being introduced at the next city council meeting regarding the CPAC ordinance. So it's still a part of the accountability, a conversation. But what I've encouraged members of CPAC to do, and those that are supportive of CPAC, is to get involved with the mayor's office, get involved with Deputy Mayor Susan Lee's office to talk about CPAC. I've encouraged that from the very beginning. That's not on me to make sure that happens. That's on the representatives of CPAC as well as the chief sponsors of that ordinance.
Okay,
I don't want to step on their toes, and they typically won't step on my toes to present their ordinance.
But isn't
So
it also?
I would recommend them to do that.
But isn't it also on the city's responsibility to listen to what the residents have been promoting?
It's
And they have
part of
been
the city's
promoting
responsibility.
CPAC far more than GAPA at every single one of those hearings.
Then, as I say, make sure the CPAC members start speaking with, as well as CPAC, the representatives, as well as the chief sponsors of the CPAC ordinance. Start talking to Susan Lee's office, start talking to the mayor's office about that ordinance, because I'm not the right person to do it. I appear as an impartial person before the CPAC and the GAPA ordinance. In fact, I've taken my name off of both of them, so that I could appear to be as impartial as possible. But your chief sponsors are responsible for taking that to the mayor's office.
Alderman, sorry, I was a little late. What happened in between?
Thanks a lot, guys.
Between the time Master